Welcome to Rappler Talk. I am Ralph Rivas. Ngayong araw ay pag-uusapan natin ang epekto ng novel coronavirus sa ekonomiya. Kumusta na nga ba ang mga mahihirap na talagang lubham na apektuhan nitong pagkalat ng sakit na ito at papaano matutulungan sila ng gobyerno. Ngayong araw ay makakausap natin ang isang senior lecturer ng School of Accounting, Economics and Finance ng University of Wollongong, si Alfredo Paloyo. Kasama siya sa mga economists na nagsulat ng isang papel para sa at nilista ang kanilang recommendations para sa gobyerno. So, good morning to you. Nasa Australia ka, tama ba?
Yeah, so afternoon ngayon dito, but good morning to you, Ralph.
Okay. So, tell us, kumusta na ba ang lagay ng ekonomiya dahil dito sa coronavirus?
So, mabilis yung developments kasi nung coronavirus. Mahirap masabi kung ano yung talagang epekto niya sa ekonomiya now. Pero nakikita natin from other countries, halimbawa in the United States and in the United Kingdom, tumataas ng mabilis ang request for unemployment insurance. Ibig sabihin, dumadami yung mga empleyado na nawawala sa kanilang trabaho. No? Expected na rin natin yan na mangyayari sa Pilipinas as the sort of quasi or de facto lockdown has taken place in parts of the country, right? So the cafes are closed, malls are closed. All of those workers are now detached from their place of employment. No? So marami sa kanila, lalo na yung mga nasa informal sector, yung tinatawag nating daily wage earners, tricycle drivers, jeepney drivers, and so on, are unable to generate income. No? So malaking problema yon. Kailangan nating masagip yung mga mamamayan na hindi nakakakuha ng kanilang sweldo pang araw-araw.
Okay, so ganun na nga yung sitwasyon, no? So yung sa paper ninyo, meron kayong mga nilatag na recommendations, pero bago yan, may sinabi rin kayo tungkol sa notion na kailangan mag-freeze yung ekonomiya. Can you tell us more about that?
Ang problema kasi is, I think we need to recognize that first of all, it's not really an economic problem in principle. In principle, it is a public health problem. Ang problema kasi natin is the solution to the public health problem is to contract the economy intentionally. So nakikita natin na sinasabi ng gobyerno na stay at home, right? Close down the businesses, let's just keep essential businesses running, and everybody else should just stay at home. Ibig sabihin, madaming mga Pilipino ang hindi nakakapagtrabaho. Kaya lang yun ang necessary steps to the best of our knowledge, to suppress the transmission or spread of the disease. So the idea is we need to freeze for a moment yung economic activities or to go into some sort of hibernation so that we can buy some time for the medical personnel to develop better treatments and maybe, if we're lucky, find a vaccine very quickly. Hindi dapat nating ini-encourage. So ang sinasabi namin sa paper is, it doesn't make sense to talk about it as a fiscal stimulus because precisely that's not what you want to happen. You want people to stay at home and stop the spread of the disease. So you're not stimulating anything. In fact, what you want to do is for people to stay behind and socially isolate themselves. Kaya lang, dahil hindi sila nakakapagtrabaho, wala rin silang kita. Doon yung role ng government. We need to be able to bridge this liquidity gap for these workers.
Okay, so the economic managers, meron silang pinopose at 27.1 billion pesos na yun nga yung binanggit mo na stimulus package. Tapos, I think more than half nun pupunta sa tourism. So, any comments about that?
So I will speak for myself. I think that's very curious because I haven't seen any detailed plans with respect to how they want to spend the money for the Department of Tourism. Ang nakita ko lang kasi is for programs of the Department of Tourism. And that is very confusing to me because who is going to fly to the Philippines right now? There are multiple travel bans. Where I am right now in Australia, we have a level 4 travel ban, the highest in Australia ever for the very first time, and it is imposed indefinitely. There are no Australians flying to the Philippines. Insurance will not cover you, and that's true for many countries. And so for me, what is tourism going to do with it? It only makes sense to me if they're going to use it to bridge the gap for their workers, because a lot of their workers, precisely because no one is traveling, will now finding themselves without jobs. No? And so maybe marami sa kanila walang kikitain. And to use that for salary continuance for these workers makes sense. But to generate programs to increase tourism right now, where there are travel restrictions everywhere, doesn't seem to make sense.
Mhm. Okay, so saan ba dapat gumastos yung gobyerno ngayon? Anong mga programs?
So, two pillars. One is the social protection, as I have been emphasizing throughout. No? Kailangan natin ma-bridge yung liquidity gap ng mga manggagawa. A lot of them may have enough money usually, but not today because now they're not working. Totoo rin yun for businesses, right? So just as much as we want to save lives with this economic contraction, we also want to save livelihoods. Maraming small and medium scale enterprises and even micro enterprises will also face the same liquidity gap that households will face because wala silang customers, right? And that's precisely the point. You don't want the customers to be touching these businesses anyway because they're at home. And so, of course, these businesses will now have to face their payroll obligations and then non-payroll obligations. They have to pay rent even though they're not running the business. We need to bridge that gap for businesses as well. So those are the two pillars. One is social protection, and number two is preserving jobs for the businesses. So I should emphasize any aid that businesses will receive should be made conditional on them retaining their workers because we don't want to subsidize business owners without any benefit to society as such, right?
Mm.
Parang kumita lang yung business owners without having to pay their workers. We want them to get the assistance so that they can continue paying their workers even though these workers are not working. But that's what we want, for them to be staying at home. The third pillar is really to set up an environment where as soon as we come out of this public health crisis, the economy can quickly rev up or restart immediately. And that's the role, I think, for the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas or the Philippine Central Bank. There should be enough liquidity there provided to business owners so that they can quickly restart. They can quickly take money from the financial system and make capital investments, pay their employees, et cetera, and expand their businesses so that we can jump back immediately onto a growth trajectory after an immediate and very sharp contraction that we want.
Okay, so marami kang sinabi, no? So balikan ko lang, no, yung sinasabi mong social protection. So ano ba to? Cash dole outs? Anong recommendations mo dito? Kung meron ba kayong amount, kung magkano kada pamilya or kada tao, or could you elaborate more on that aspect?
So both. I think it's important that households receive both cash and non-cash. Ang estimates range, at least for Metro Manila, range from between 18 billion to 25 billion just to keep them at a sort of subsistence level or just above the food threshold, if you want. So malaking amount of money ang kailangan. Ang problema kasi natin is mahirap i-distribute. No? Unlike more developed economies, people can claim unemployment insurance or meron silang mga bank accounts. No? In fact, in the Philippines, the majority of people above the age of 15, majority so lampas 50%, do not even have a bank account. No? So the financial inclusivity situation in the Philippines is huge. So the government, even if it wants to give money to these people, it's very difficult to give money that way. No? But maybe food we can give immediately. So of course, the national government and local governments have disaster response infrastructure in place, no? To distribute non-food, non-cash items. No? So food,
So what about
medicine, and water, and so on.
So what about vouchers? Sa tingin mo effective 'yun? Kasi yun nga nabanggit mo kanina na maraming walang bank accounts. So is that a good workaround?
So that's part of our suggestions to provide households with vouchers that they can spend on food and essential items and anywhere. So meron kang halimbawa isang household, nakatanggap ka ng voucher. If you want, you can spend it in Rustans or in the palengke, whatever. The point is that they should be able to receive these vouchers so that they can buy essential items like food and medicine.
Okay, so punta naman tayo doon sa paano mag-save ng mga trabaho. Any particular steps that you'd like to highlight para dito?
So I think one of the things that we learned from this crisis is we don't have a very good infrastructure for paid sick leave, unlike in many other economies. No? Ang problema kasi is a lot of these workers who get sick continue to go to work anyway because if they don't get paid, right? So kailangan natin palakasin yung ating paid sick leave sort of situation in the country. No? We also need to be able to pay the businesses so that the businesses themselves can pay their employees. At the moment, they can't do that via their own revenue, no? Because precisely people are staying at home. So that has to be financed by some other entity. And in this case, we're proposing the government should finance businesses so that the businesses can pay their employees, conditional on the fact that they preserve these jobs. Because when the economy starts to rev up again, we want these businesses to quickly be able to re-employ their furloughed employees, meaning yung mga hindi nagtatrabaho but were not detached from their employer.
Okay, so naalala ko rin sa paper ninyo, may recommendation kayo para sa airlines, correct? Could you tell us more about that? Kasi talagang sila yung apektado eh. Parang kung titingnan mo, I mean, Philippine Airlines has been in the red for a couple of years already. Tapos dumating pa tong coronavirus. Cebu Pacific, nag-lay off na ng mga empleyado. So ano ang dapat gawin ng mga airlines?
The airlines will have to take a huge hit, right? Many airlines in many other countries have already grounded a large part of their fleet and have cut their routes. So Qantas, for example, will stop flying at the end of the month, if I recall correctly. It's a very difficult position. The government is it's not always good for the government to choose winners and losers in the economy. So malaking risk ang sinasabi natin that the government should consider giving breaks to the airlines. But it seems warranted in this case because they are acutely feeling the impacts of the crisis. It's a kind of risk that people may argue whether they should have been able to insure against this risk or not. But clearly, most of them have not insured for this type of risk. And if they are not saved, there will be a huge impact on their industry. But also, I think more importantly, symbolic kasi yung airlines. So, I think we're kind of proud to say all the time, no, that the Philippine Airlines is the first airline in Asia, first commercial airline anyway. No, for the Philippine Airlines to go under because of something that is very difficult to insure against is something that we should consider. But again, there are tinatawag nating moral hazard issues. We don't want to encourage companies to perform poorly with the hopes of the government just saving them in the future. No? So it's a very delicate balance. The government is in a very, very difficult position. And I sympathize with our colleagues from the Department of Finance and other members of the executive and the legislative because mahirap yung trabaho nila ngayon. It is a balancing act and it could go either way, ang sinasabi natin.
Okay, so what these recommendations, so social protection, tsaka at the same time yung saving jobs, saving businesses, helping them bumangon ulit. So how do you, anong may recommendations ba kayo on how to operationalize this? Maybe another task force, another body to do this? May recommendations ba kayong ganon?
So I think there is no need to create a lot of new offices. So halimbawa, yung pag-distribute ng financial and non-financial aid, the DSWD, alam natin, has the 4 Ps or the programang Pantawid Pamilihan Pilipino or something like this, right? May listahan ang DSWD ng mga poor households. And I think it would be relatively easy, not entirely very easy, but relatively easy for them to find out who are the new households that have been thrust into poverty because of this situation and identify them and to be able to distribute the aid to them. Tupad is also another program. This is for displaced workers. Pwede rin natin gamitin yung ganung infrastructure. On the other hand, for businesses, they can take the loans from private financial institutions or private banks. It doesn't have to be the government providing it. The government can simply give these businesses tax credits in the future. So utang ako ngayon, but I will claim that from my taxes in the future. So it doesn't have to be businesses directly loaning money from the BSP. but they can loan it from banks, and the banks should be able to provide it with enough support from the BSP.
Okay, so you mentioned the BSP, no? So anong magiging papel ngayon ng Bangko Sentral with all of this? Anong kailangan nilang gawin?
So at the moment, alam natin yung Bangko Sentral has reduced the policy interest rate and have made adjustments in the discount window. So ngayon, pwede na umutang yung mga bangko from the central bank. And that's good. That's very important to make sure that when the economy starts to rev up or nakalampas na tayo sa public health crisis, madaling makakuha ng pera ang mga businesses. Madali silang maka-take out ng loan so that they can spend it on capital investments and to rehire their furloughed employees.
Okay, so sa ngayon, no, parang on our first, after tapos na yung 1 week ng lockdown, we're on our second week. And probably mga a month or more pa to. So ano mga dapat bantayan ngayon ng gobyerno na mga moving parts?
I think there is, from what I hear, of course, I'm not on the ground, there might be some inconsistencies in how local governments are implementing certain lockdown or quarantine guidelines. I think it's important for all the local government units in Metro Manila and the surrounding areas or cities to be able to coordinate their response, because people, as you know, in Metro Manila, people commute across cities. And so there are, of course, frictions or may mga pagkahihirap na nadadanas ng mga tao because there are different quarantine regulations across cities. So that's, I think, one of the more important things. But immediately, I think, and this is the biggest issue, the immediate concern is to be able to provide the financial and non-financial aids to the most vulnerable, because the impact of the pandemic is not equally shared. Most households, or many households who are middle class or upper middle class or very rich households, have savings. They can use these savings for a certain amount of time to tide over their finances. Kaya lang yung mga mahihirap, either they are already in debt or wala silang savings. They will not be able to participate in the economy. So they should, I think, as a matter of government policy, they should be able to get the financial and non-financial aids as soon as possible.
Okay, so with everything happening, how likely is a recession?
Oh, I think the recession has already started. Mabagal lang yung pasok ng data. But I mean, I could be wrong, of course. But with the amount of economic contraction that will have to occur, if we're not going to solve this public health crisis, there will most likely be a recession. Globally, already, I think there is no doubt there will be a global recession. And this, of course, includes countries like the Philippines, who we export quite a lot. And the markets that we export to may also have issues going forward. So I think there will be some repercussions with respect to how quickly we can grow the economy in the future.
So I think yung mga ganong punto, kailangan na lang tanggapin, no? Na this is what's happening right now. So how long do you think will this last? Is this sharp and temporary or prolonged ba to?
So we want it sharp and temporary. But it's difficult to say. I think ang importante message to get out is the medical professionals are really the heroes of the day, because a lot of these things will depend on how quickly medical researchers will be able to produce good treatments, better testing procedures, and potentially a vaccine against the virus. Clearly, it would be a very unfortunate outcome to extend some sort of lockdown or quarantine for 1 year, for example. That's a huge ask from the citizens, from businesses, and from governments, and not all will be able to provide for everybody's benefit. No? So it's hard to say, but we hope that it is short and transitory.
Okay, so let's just wrap up this interview now. Main points yung mga gusto mong i-emphasize, what the government should do, what the private sector should do, what we individuals can do to help our country right now.
So individuals, ang problema kasi dito is it requires a lot of sacrifice. We really want to go out, lalo na mga Pilipino, mahilig gumimik, right? We really want to go out and meet our friends and conduct our businesses, right? And you cannot blame them because daily wage earners, no? Uh, but it requires quite a lot of sacrifice from all of us to withdraw from those activities, to buy the people who are working on the treatment and the vaccine and those people working in the hospitals and clinics some time to be able to manage the impact of the virus on society. So that's one. It requires a massive amount of individual sacrifice. Number two, there is a social contract, I think, between the citizens and the government. The citizens should be able to provide that sacrifice for the rest of the nation if the government does its part in securing their lives. And they should be able to do that now, very quickly, because the consequences of not doing that are very dire. And finally, there is a role, I think, for businesses to play here. As we have seen from the private sector over the last few days, the Ayala Group, for example, San Miguel, and so on, have provided a lot of things. So salary continuance, San Miguel has converted a gin factory into producing alcohol, and so on and so forth. They have a role to play. We ask, I think, businesses to try to hold on to their workers, even if the workers are not working. And it's a big ask, right? It's a big ask from citizens, it's a big ask from businesses, and it is also a big ask from the government. But it can only work if everybody does his or her own share.
Alfredo, sorry, pahabol ko lang, no? Kasi President Duterte, there's a proposal na gustong i-take over ng government yung businesses. Maraming listahan yan. So what are your thoughts on that?
I have no idea of the legal basis for these things. What I will only say is that I think people should consider that idea very carefully, because the cost benefit analysis in that type of situation is very huge and very dramatic if you fall on either side of the equation. Uh, the things that we take over, we may not be able to give back to the private sector, right? And that's a very bad signal to send to the rest of the world. On the other hand, of course, there are certain things that require to be done very quickly, and he may need that extra power. But in our view, a lot of the things that can be done now are already allowed for by the current legal environment or the current legal framework. But again, if somebody wants to do that, it really needs to be evaluated very carefully.
Okay. So thank you so much for your time. That was Alfredo Paloyo of the University of Wollongong in Australia. And I'm Ralph Rivas. Thanks so much for watching.